Have you ever been treated like a burden by the very people you sacrificed everything for? What if one day, the child you raised with love, food, sleepless nights, and broken dreams, looked you in the eyes and said, "You're just an extra mouth to feed"? Get out. What would you do? Cry? Beg? Or would you rise so high that the same people who threw you away would one day kneel before you? My name is Margaret. I am 63 years old. I was once a mother, a wife, and a dreamer, but life doesn't care about titles. Life only cares about how much you can endure before you break. I never thought my daughter, the one I carried in my womb for 9 painful months, would be the one to snap me in half. It began on a rainy Thursday, the kind of rain that feels heavy, not just on your skin, but in your bones. I was sitting by the window of my daughter's apartment, staring at the gray clouds that looked just as tired as I felt. My joints ached from years of factory work, my hands were rough from scrubbing, cooking, holding, losing, yet my heart was still tender when it came to family. "Mom," Claire said, standing in the kitchen, her arms crossed like a judge about to hand down a sentence. Her husband, Tom, sat behind her, sipping coffee like a spectator at an execution. "Yes, dear," I answered, already sensing the storm in her voice. She didn't soften. She didn't hesitate. "You can't stay here anymore." The words didn't fall. They cut. Sharp, cold, final. I blinked. "What do you mean?" I thought this was temporary. Until I get back on my feet. Tom smirked, his lips curling as if my suffering was entertainment. Claire looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You're an extra mouth to feed. We have bills, rent, kids. You were just in the way." Extra mouth. The phrase repeated in my head like a drumbeat. As if I wasn't the mouth that once starved so she could eat. As if I wasn't the hands that worked double shifts to buy her school books. As if I wasn't the eyes that stayed open every night when she was sick. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her of every sacrifice. But the lump in my throat grew so large that words suffocated inside me. Instead, I gathered my worn-out coat, stuffed my few belongings into a plastic bag, and walked out. The rain didn't wait for me to find shelter. It poured, heavy, relentless. My bones shivered, but not from the cold, from betrayal. As I stumbled down the street, soaked and humiliated, one question haunted me. Was I truly just an extra mouth now? The city lights blurred with my tears. I sat on a bench near the corner of Maple Street, shivering, my plastic bag clutched to my chest like it held the last pieces of my dignity. People passed by, some staring, most ignoring. To them, I was just another old woman lost in the city. But inside me, something shifted. A spark, a fire, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "No, Margaret. You are not an extra mouth. You are a storm waiting to be unleashed." The next morning, I walked into a diner and ordered the cheapest coffee. As I sipped, I overheard 2 men in suits talking about property values rising in the neighborhood, about how the very building my daughter lived in was about to skyrocket in price. That's when the idea struck. What if I didn't beg for a place in their world? What if I owned the very ground they stood on? I smiled for the first time in days. Not a sweet, motherly smile, but the kind of smile wolves wear before they hunt. They threw me out like trash. But soon, I'd buy their building, and when the rent tripled, they'd finally understand the cost of betrayal. The game had just begun. The morning after that stormy eviction, I woke up on a borrowed couch in a women's shelter. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, buzzing like tired bees. The air smelled of disinfectant, and the quiet sobs of other broken women echoed through the thin walls. I stared at the cracked ceiling and whispered to myself, "This isn't the end." Not for me, but the truth was, I had nothing, no savings, no home, no family. My hands trembled as I held my cup of watery soup at lunch. Every spoonful felt like defeat. Yet, as I sat there, I couldn't stop replaying those words I overheard in the diner. Property values rising. That building will triple in worth soon. The thought became an obsession. My daughter's building. The same building I had just been kicked out of. What if I owned it? What if fate was giving me a chance to strike back? But how? I was a 63-year-old woman with no money, no job, no allies. That night, as I lay in the shelter's bunk, staring at the shadows on the wall, I remembered something. A memory buried deep under years of exhaustion. Back when my husband was alive, we had savings. He always told me, "Margaret, one day you'll need this. Don't let the world know what you hide." I had almost forgotten. A small, dusty envelope tucked inside an old sewing machine I kept in storage. My secret savings. The very next day, I rushed to the storage unit. The lock clicked open with shaky hands, and there it was, my old Singer sewing machine, chipped, heavy, loyal. I turned it upside down, unscrewed the base, and there, wrapped in yellowed paper, was the envelope. Inside, a stack of bonds and cash. Not a fortune, but enough to start. Enough to breathe life into revenge. I clutched that envelope to my chest, tears streaming down my face. "Oh, Robert," I whispered to my late husband, "you always knew I'd need this." The following weeks became a blur of determination. By day, I scrubbed dishes in a diner for a few dollars. By night, I studied. I haunted libraries, watched free lectures on real estate, begged bankers for meetings. Most laughed, some dismissed me, but every no only sharpened me. I wasn't just learning how to buy a building. I was learning how to wield power. One evening, I returned to the shelter with my hands raw from scrubbing, but my spirit fierce. A younger woman there, Maria, noticed. "You look different," she said. I smiled, "because I finally know what I want." "And what's that?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "Revenge." Maria laughed nervously, but I wasn't joking. Weeks turned into months. The bonds my husband left gave me leverage, and my persistence wore down a small-time property agent named Mr. Hill. He was slick, always checking his gold watch, always talking too fast. At first, he brushed me off, but when I showed him the envelope, his eyes gleamed with interest. "You want to buy that building?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said firmly. "Lady, that's a tough deal. Tenants, repairs, rising costs." "I don't care," I cut in. "Make it happen." Something in my voice silenced him. He studied me, then finally nodded. "All right, if you're serious, I'll make some calls." From that moment, the wheels began turning. At night, I'd sneak by the building, their building. I'd stand in the shadows across the street, watching the windows glow. I could see silhouettes of my daughter's family moving around inside. Sometimes laughter, sometimes arguments, and I'd whisper to myself, "Enjoy it while it lasts, Claire. Because soon, every light in that building will belong to me." The irony fed me. The thought of holding the keys to the very place I was thrown out of, it kept me alive. But every plan comes with risk. One night, Tom saw me lingering across the street. He stepped outside, his broad shoulders blocking the doorway. "What are you doing here, old woman?" he barked. I forced a shaky smile. "Just passing by," he sneered, pathetic, still hanging around, hoping for scraps. He spat on the sidewalk and walked back inside. My nails dug into my palms. I wanted to scream, to strike, to reveal what I was planning. But no, not yet. Revenge is best served quietly until the moment it burns. And when the papers were finally signed, when I became the official owner of that building, I didn't rush to tell them. No, I waited. I let the silence grow, like a predator circling its prey. Because the true sting of betrayal is the moment your betrayer realizes the tables have turned. And soon, my daughter would find out the rent had tripled. Not from a stranger, but from her mother. The morning the rent notices went out, I woke earlier than usual. My heart thudded against my ribs as I folded the papers, each stamped with a new amount. Triple, enough to make every tenant in that building shiver. But for one family in particular, it would be devastating. I slid the envelopes into the mail slots with trembling fingers. Not from fear, but from anticipation. The air was thick, heavy, as if the whole street knew something irreversible was about to happen. Hours later, I stationed myself in the cafe across the street, the one with the foggy windows and bitter coffee. From there, I could see everything. At exactly 8:45 a.m., the door to the building creaked open. Claire stepped out, mail in hand, her hair tied in a messy bun, her face pinched with irritation. She shuffled through the letters, then froze. I could almost hear the gasp from across the street. She tore open the envelope, eyes darting back and forth over the words. Her face paled, then flushed crimson. No, 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 she muttered, pacing on the steps. Tom joined her moments later, still in his robe, scratching his head. What's the problem now? He grumbled. Claire shoved the paper in his face. His jaw tightened as he read it. This has to be a mistake. Triple rent? No way. She shook her head wildly. We can't afford this, Tom. Not with the bills, the kids' school, everything. We'll drown. I sipped my coffee, a slow smile creeping across my lips. The taste was bitter, but the satisfaction, sweet. The following week was chaos inside that building. Tenants stormed into the manager's office, slamming doors, raising voices. I received calls from Hill, the agent. They're furious, Mrs. Dalton, he said, trying to mask his nerves. Good, I replied simply. But your daughter, she's just another tenant. I interrupted, my tone cold. No exceptions. That night, I lay in my shelter bed, staring at the cracked ceiling again. Except this time, my chest was not heavy with sorrow. It was alive, burning with a dangerous pride. For once in my life, I wasn't powerless. The next evening, as I walked past the building, I caught a glimpse through Claire's window. She sat at the table, head buried in her hands, while Tom paced, waving the notice around like a white flag of defeat. Their voices rose and fell, sharp and desperate. And for a fleeting moment, guilt pricked me. This was my daughter, my flesh, my blood, but then the memory of her voice cut through me again. Cold, merciless, you're an extra mouth to feed. Get out. The guilt evaporated. The cracks were forming, but I wasn't done. Not yet. Weeks passed, and the pressure grew. Tenants started moving out, unable to keep up with the new rent. Each empty apartment echoed like a victory bell. Every slam of a door was music to my ears. But Claire and Tom, they clung stubbornly, scraping together money, borrowing, cutting corners. Tom took on extra shifts. Claire started selling jewelry online. Their pride wouldn't let them leave. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because the longer they stayed, the deeper they'd sink. One evening, I received an anonymous note slipped under my door at the shelter. Just 3 words, written in a hurried hand. Why you doing this? No name, no signature, but I knew. Claire had recognized my handwriting on one of the posted notices. She knew. The next day, as I left the cafe, I found her waiting on the corner. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights. She stepped in front of me, blocking my path. Mom, she whispered, voice trembling. It's you, isn't it? You bought the building. I didn't answer. My silence was confirmation enough. Tears welled in her eyes. Why? Why would you do this to us? We your family. Family. The word tasted like poison. I leaned closer, so only she could hear me. Because family doesn't throw their mother out into the rain. Her face crumbled. She reached out as if to grab my hand, but I stepped back. For the first time, she was the one begging, and I was the one turning away. The power shift was intoxicating. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Because revenge isn't just about making someone pay. It's about watching them realize they can't escape. And Claire was only starting to understand the prison she had walked into. Claire's knock came at my shelter door the next morning. I knew it was her before I even opened it. The frantic pounding, the desperation in every beat. When I cracked the door, she stood there, her hair wild, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked nothing like the polished daughter I once raised, the one who used to laugh in sunlit kitchens, the one who once held my hand crossing busy streets. Mom, she pleaded, her voice raw. Please, please don't do this. We can't pay this rent. We'll lose everything. Her words should have softened me. They should have rekindled some maternal instinct. But all I saw was that rainy Thursday, the bags in my hands, the humiliation on my shoulders, the words extra mouth cutting through me like glass. I opened the door wider, not for kindness, but for the theater of it. Let her see the peeling paint, the metal bunk beds, the empty-eyed women who shuffled in the background. Let her see where she had tossed me. You sent me here, I said quietly. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. My voice cracked like a whip. You meant every word, and now you're paying for it. She collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Tom wasn't with her this time, perhaps too proud, too angry to beg. She whispered, "We'll be homeless, Mom." The kids? What about the kids? The kids? My grandchildren. For a moment, my heart wavered. Their little faces flashed in my memory, sticky fingers tugging at my sleeve, sweet giggles echoing through small rooms. They were innocent. They didn't deserve this. But then I remembered how those same children were kept from me after I left. How Claire had cut me out, not even letting me visit, not even letting me hear their laughter again. "Go home, Claire," I said coldly. "Figure it out. That's what you told me, isn't it?" Her sobs followed me long after she left. Days turned into weeks, and the cracks widened. Tom's temper flared more often. I heard from neighbors that shouting matches erupted in their apartment at night, the walls shaking with rage. Claire was spotted at pawn shops, selling whatever she could. Her once bright eyes grew hollow, her shoulders slumped with shame. And I watched, always from a distance, always silent, until one night, a storm rolled in, much like the night they had thrown me out. I sat in the cafe, rain streaking the glass, when I saw something that made my chest tighten. Claire and Tom, dragging suitcases down the stairs of the building, their children trailing behind, clutching stuffed animals. They were leaving. Claire's eyes scanned the street, and for a second, our gazes met through the downpour. Hers filled with a mixture of anger, grief, and something else, a silent question. "Is this what you wanted?" And the truth was, yes. But also no, because revenge, I was learning, is never as clean as you imagine. It's messy, it bleeds, it stains not only the target, but the hand that strikes. Still, I didn't stop them. I didn't call out. I didn't offer a lifeline. I simply watched as they disappeared into the rain, dragging their broken lives behind them. The next morning, their apartment sat empty. For the first time in months, silence reigned inside that building. No laughter, no arguments, no footsteps. Just quiet. I walked the halls alone, my heels echoing against the floorboards. And as I passed the door to their unit, I paused. My hand hovered over the knob, but I didn't turn it. Instead, I whispered into the stillness, "Now you know how it feels." But as I walked away, a gnawing feeling grew inside me. Satisfaction, yes, but also a hollow ache. Because revenge may fill the wound with fire, but it doesn't always heal it. And deep down, I wondered, had I punished him enough? Or was there still more to come? That question haunted me, and the answer was about to arrive in a way I never expected. The silence in the building should have comforted me. No more shouting matches from Claire and Tom. No more late-night footsteps or laughter behind closed doors. Their absence was proof of my victory. But the quiet had a weight, an emptiness that followed me down every hallway. One night, as I inspected the property, I noticed something strange. A small envelope slipped under the office door. My name written in a child's handwriting, crooked and shaky. I froze. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, crumpled and stained with what looked like teardrops. It read, "Dear Grandma, why don't you love us anymore? Mommy cries all the time. Daddy is angry. We miss you. Please come back. Love, Emma, my granddaughter." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I sank into the nearest chair, clutching the note, my throat tightening. I hadn't expected this. My anger had always been aimed at Claire, at Tom. But the children, no, they were never supposed to bleed. Whispered, "Emma, oh, baby girl." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, her big brown eyes staring up at me, confused, hurt. My vengeance had collateral damage. The next morning, I decided to check where Claire and her family had gone. Through whispers of neighbors and a reluctant tip from Hill, I found out they were living in a cramped basement apartment across town. Mold on the walls, leaky pipes, barely enough space for the kids to stretch their legs. I went there, not openly, not yet. I stood across the street, hidden behind a row of parked cars, and watched. Through the cracked curtains, I saw them. Claire folding laundry on the floor. Tom fixing a wobbly chair. The children huddled under a blanket, watching cartoons on an old TV. And then, I saw Emma. She stood by the window, staring out with sad eyes. For a second, I thought she saw me. My heart leapt into my throat. But then she turned away, her little shoulders sagging. I stumbled back into the shadows, tears blurring my vision. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. Revenge was supposed to taste sweet, to burn away the bitterness they left in me. But seeing those children suffer, it curdled something inside me. Yet, part of me whispered, this is still their mother's fault. Claire made her choices. She kicked you out. She wrote this story. I clung to that thought, but it grew weaker every day. One evening, as I reviewed tenant payments in the office, Hill stormed in, his face flushed. "Margaret, we've got a problem," he said. "What now?" I asked, annoyed. "Your daughter, Claire, she came here today. She was begging the tenants to protest against you. She wants to take you to housing court for unfair rent hikes. She's stirring trouble." My blood ran cold. So that was her move. After all the begging, all the tears, she had chosen to fight back. For a long moment, I stared out the office window at the darkening sky. Rain clouds gathered, heavy and gray, just like that night months ago when I was thrown out. Except this time, it wasn't me standing in the storm. It was her. But as lightning cracked across the sky, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. If Claire managed to rally the tenants, if she dragged me into court, everything I had built could crumble. The hunter and the prey were about to change places again, and I wasn't sure if my heart or my conscience was ready for what would come next. The summons arrived on a damp Tuesday morning. A thick envelope, sealed in cold authority, delivered to my office. Housing court, tenant dispute, and at the bottom of the page, in bold black ink, lead plaintiff, Claire Dalton. I sat frozen, the paper trembling in my hands. My own daughter, dragging me to court. My daughter, declaring war. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I had spent months building this empire of spite, brick by brick, fueled by betrayal. But now, my enemy wasn't just another tenant. She was my blood, my reflection. That night, I walked the building's halls in silence, my shoes clicking against the worn tiles. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the pipes seemed to mock me. This was my kingdom, my fortress. And yet, it was cracking from within. The next morning, I dressed in my best coat, the one Robert had bought me years ago, and walked into the courtroom. The air smelled of dust and old paper, the benches filled with strangers waiting for their own battles. And then I saw her. Claire sat across the room, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She looked smaller than I remembered, worn down, but her jaw was set with determination. Tom sat beside her, stiff and grim, and the children, thank God, were not there. Her eyes lifted and met mine. For a second, the world disappeared. It was just us, mother and daughter, love and hate, colliding in silence. When the judge entered, the spell broke. The hearing began. Claire's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a greedy landlord who preyed on struggling families. Every word cut like a knife, not because it was true, but because it was Claire's voice behind them, even if her lips weren't moving. Then it was my turn. My lawyer, Hill's associate, laid out the facts: legal ownership, market trends, rising costs. Everything justified, everything in order, but as he spoke, I watched Claire's hands trembling in her lap, her knuckles white. And suddenly, the courtroom wasn't just about rent. It was about decades of unspoken words, of sacrifices unseen, of wounds unhealed. When the judge adjourned for the day, Claire walked past me without a glance. But as she reached the door, she slipped. Just slightly. Her hand reached out to steady herself, and instinctively, without thinking, I moved forward. For one brief second, my hand almost caught hers. But she pulled back, as if my touch burned, and hurried away. That night, I returned to the shelter instead of the building. I sat on the edge of the bunk, clutching Emma's letter. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. What had I become? I had clawed my way back from humiliation, built a fortress of power around my pain. But now, I was standing on the other side of the same cruelty I once suffered. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. The following week, as I prepared documents for the next hearing, Hill burst into the office, sweating and pale. "Margaret," he hissed, shutting the door behind him. "There's something you need to know." "Something about Tom?" I frowned. "What about him?" Hill leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's not just angry about the rent. He's been hiding debts, gambling debts, dangerous ones. He's using this case to stall, to keep the wolves at bay." My stomach dropped. So this wasn't just about revenge. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about secrets far darker than I had imagined, secrets that could destroy Claire, the children, and everything I thought I knew. And suddenly, my victory felt fragile. Because in this war, I wasn't the only one playing with fire. Hill's words echoed in my mind like thunder, gambling debts. Dangerous ones. I couldn't shake him off. Everywhere I went, the shelter, the building, the cafe, I kept picturing Tom, his smug grin, his dismissive sneer, the way he'd sipped coffee like a king the day Claire threw me out. But now, he wasn't a king. He was a man drowning in shadows. Later, as I walked past the basement apartment where Claire now lived, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A black sedan parked across the street. Two men sat inside, smoking, their eyes fixed on the windows. Predators. Waiting. I knew the look. I'd seen it years ago when a neighbor owed the wrong people too much money. I quickened my steps, heart pounding. For a moment, I wanted to run up those stairs, bang on Claire's door, scream at her to take the children and leave. But the bitter voice inside me snapped. She didn't care when it was you in danger. Why should you care now? Still, as I turned the corner, guilt gnawed at me. Emma's letter burned in my pocket like a brand. The next day, the truth spilled out. Hill slid a folder across my desk. Inside, overdue credit statements, casino markers, IOUs signed in Tom's handwriting. The numbers were staggering. "This man is toxic," Hill said flatly. "He's going to drag your daughter and those kids down with him. If the collectors don't get him, the law will. You think this court case is about rent? It's his smokescreen." I sat in silence, my fists clenched. Tom, the man who had smirked when I was thrown into the rain. The man who stood by, silent, as Claire's words cut me. Now, his lies were unraveling. And yet, Claire was tied to him. The children, too. That evening, I walked the building halls, the echo of my footsteps a drumbeat of doubt. Revenge had been clear, sharp, intoxicating. But now it was tangled in something darker. If Tom went down, Claire would fall with him. The children would suffer. I stopped outside their old apartment. Empty, cold, lifeless. My reflection in the dusty glass looked unfamiliar. Harder, older, haunted. Then I heard it. A child's voice. "Grandma." I spun around. Emma stood in the hallway, clutching a stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide. My chest tightened. She stepped closer. "Mommy says you don't love us anymore. Is it true?" The words shattered me. My throat burned, but no sound came. Finally, I knelt, my knees aching, and whispered, "Oh, baby. I never stopped loving you. Not for a second." She tilted her head. "Then why are you making Mommy cry?" Tears spilled before I could stop them. I hugged her, holding on as if she were the last piece of my broken soul. Her small arms wrapped around my neck, and for a fleeting moment, the anger, the bitterness, it all melted away. But then Tom's voice thundered down the hall. "Emma, get back here." He appeared, his face red, his breath sharp with whiskey. When his eyes met mine, they narrowed with pure venom. "You," he spat, "stay away from my family." I rose slowly, shielding Emma behind me. "Your family, you're the one destroying them." He stepped closer, his fists clenched. "You think you can come back and play savior? You're nothing, just an old hag with money." For the first time in months, I didn't back down. I met his glare with steel in my voice. "Maybe, but I'm an old hag who owns the ground you stand on. And I'm not done yet." His sneer faltered just for a moment. But in that crack, I saw it, the fear, the desperation of a man cornered. And I knew then, Tom wasn't just my enemy. He was a ticking bomb. If I didn't act soon, he wouldn't just destroy himself. He'd drag Claire, Emma, and the others straight into the fire with him. And suddenly, revenge didn't feel enough anymore. This wasn't about rent. This was about survival, about saving what was left of my family, before it was too late. The explosion didn't come all at once. It came in whispers. Tenants whispering about men loitering near the basement apartment. Late-night arguments that rattled thin walls. Shouts, crashes, then sudden silence. Tom was unraveling. One night, as I passed by on my way back to the shelter, I saw Claire standing outside in the rain, clutching her coat tight. Her face was pale, her lips swollen. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She was just hollow. She saw me and froze. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain poured between us like a curtain. Finally, her voice broke through, flat and lifeless. "You got what you wanted, Mom. We're broken. Happy now." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. But before I could answer, the door behind her slammed open. Tom stormed out, his eyes bloodshot, his fists shaking. "Get back inside," he roared, grabbing her arm. Something in me snapped. The woman who once stayed silent, who once swallowed humiliation, she was gone. "Let her go," I shouted, my voice sharper than the thunder above us. Tom turned, sneering. "Or what? You'll raise the rent again." He shoved Claire toward the door, and for the first time in my life, I lunged at him. I was old, my body weak, but fury is its own weapon. My hands shoved against his chest, hard enough to stagger him back a step. For a second, he just stared at me, stunned. Then he laughed, a dark, hollow sound. "You think you scare me, old woman? You are nothing." But his laugh cracked when headlights flared across the street. The black sedan again. The same two men stepped out, their faces shadowed, their movements deliberate. Tom stiffened, his bravado evaporating. "Not now," he muttered, almost to himself. The men crossed the street slowly, like wolves circling prey. One of them spoke, voice low and cold. "You've run out of time, Dalton. The boss wants his money. Tonight." Claire's breath hitched. "Money? Tom, what did you do?" Tom's face twisted, rage and fear battling behind his eyes. "It's nothing. Just get inside." But the men didn't stop. One reached into his coat. The rain hissed around us, the night vibrating with danger. Without thinking, I stepped in front of Claire. My arms spread wide, shielding her the way I once shielded her from bullies, from fevers, from nightmares. "You'll go through me first," I said, my voice shaking but steady. The man's hand froze on the weapon inside his coat. His eyes flicked to me, then back to Tom. A beat of silence. Then he smirked. "You're lucky, old lady. This ain't your fight. Yet." They backed away, slipping into the night, leaving only their promise hanging heavy in the air. Tonight, when they were gone, Claire clutched my arm, trembling. "Mom, what's happening?" I looked at her, truly looked at her. Not as the daughter who betrayed me, but as the little girl I once cradled, who once believed I could protect her from anything. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was war. "Get the children," I whispered urgently. "Pack only what you can carry. Now." Tom tried to protest, his voice breaking with desperation. "No, I can fix this. Just give me time." I rounded on him, my voice sharp as lightning. "You had time. You wasted it. You're not dragging him down with you." For the first time, Tom looked at me with something other than scorn. He looked afraid. Within the hour, Claire and the kids were at my side, their belongings stuffed into garbage bags, their faces pale and confused. We slipped through the rain-slick streets, away from the basement apartment, away from the shadows hunting Tom. As I led them toward the shelter, my heart pounded with a truth I could no longer ignore. I had started this as revenge. But now, I was standing between my family and destruction. And if Tom's demons came for us again, I would be ready. Because I was no longer just a mother. I was the storm they had created. The shelter was crowded, noisy, chaotic. Mothers cradling babies, teenagers arguing in hushed tones, volunteers handing out thin blankets. But amidst the storm of human desperation, Claire and her children huddled close to me. For the first time in months, they looked to me not as a burden, not as an extra mouth, but as a shield. Yet my mind wasn't calm. I kept replaying the look in those men's eyes, the cold certainty. They weren't bluffing. Tom's time had run out. And I knew it was only a matter of hours before they came back to collect. That night, Claire and I sat side by side on the edge of a bunk bed. The children were asleep, their small bodies curled together under a donated quilt. She broke the silence first, her voice hoarse. "Mom, I was wrong." I turned to her slowly. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "That night, when I told you to leave, I thought I was protecting my family. But I wasn't protecting anyone. I was just scared, and selfish, and cruel." Her words, fragile and raw, cut deeper than any courtroom speech. I swallowed hard. "You broke me, Claire. You left me in the rain like trash." She flinched, nodding. "I know. And now I'm paying for it." Silence stretched between us, heavy with years of wounds unspoken. Then she whispered, almost pleading, "But please, don't let my children pay for my mistakes." I stared at her, at the daughter I had loved, lost, and hated all in the same breath. And for the first time, I saw her not as the villain of my story, but as a broken woman, trapped in a cage she built with Tom. I reached out, my hand trembling, and laid it over hers. "The children won't. Not while I'm alive." It was the closest thing to forgiveness I could give. But forgiveness didn't erase danger. The next day, the storm finally broke. I returned to the building to collect documents when I saw it. Tom, staggering in the lobby, his shirt torn, his face bruised. His eyes were wild, darting like a hunted animal. When he saw me, he spat, "This is your fault. They're after me because of you. Because you took everything." My voice was steady, though my heart pounded. "They're after you because of your lies, your debts, your greed." He lunged at me, his hand raised, fury blazing. But before he could strike, the front doors slammed open. The two men from the sedan entered, calm, methodical. Creditors finally closing in. Tom froze, his rage evaporating into terror. Please, just give me more time." One of the men shook his head. "Time's up." The lobby fell silent, the air thick with dread. I could feel my pulse in my ears, my hands trembling at my sides. And then, without thinking, I stepped forward. "Take me instead." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The men turned, their brows furrowing. Tom gaped at me like I'd lost my mind. "I own this building," I said, my voice steady. "I have assets. I have money. Leave him, and take the debt from me." It was madness. It was reckless. But in that moment, I saw Emma's letter in my mind, her crooked handwriting asking, "Why don't you love us anymore?" This was the answer. The men studied me, then exchanged a look. Finally, one of them smirked. "Maybe you're smarter than he is." They grabbed Tom by the collar anyway, dragging him toward the door. "But the boss wants a message delivered," one of them said, glancing back at me. "Debt doesn't disappear. Remember that." The doors slammed shut behind them. Tom's screams faded into the night. And just like that, he was gone. I stood frozen in the lobby, my breath ragged, my hands shaking. For months, I had dreamed of revenge, of making Claire suffer, of watching Tom crumble. And now, in one brutal moment, it had all come true. But instead of triumph, all I felt was emptiness. I whispered into the hollow silence, "Was it worth it?" The answer didn't come. Not from the walls, not from the rain outside, not even from the ghosts of my own heart. But when I returned to the shelter and saw Emma running into my arms, clutching me with all the strength of her tiny body, I knew one thing for certain. Revenge may have fueled me, but love would have to save me. Tom never came back. The whispers said he skipped town after that night, dragged off into the underworld of debts he could never repay. Some said he vanished across the border. Others murmured that he was buried in the shadows he owed too much to. For me, his absence was not victory. It was silence. The building remained mine. The tenants still paid rent. The structure still stood tall against the gray skyline. But the war that had raged inside my heart had left scars deeper than any cracked brick or peeling paint. At the shelter, life was slowly pieced together. Claire found work cleaning offices. The children went to school, their laughter cautious but returning like the first fragile buds of spring. And me, I stayed close, watching, protecting. One afternoon, Emma sat beside me on the bunk bed, her rabbit tucked under her arm. She looked at me with those wide, honest eyes. "Grandma, are you still mad at Mummy?" I smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Mad, maybe a little, but love doesn't disappear just because you're angry." She tilted her head. "So you love her even when she's mean?" My throat tightened, especially then. Emma thought about that for a while, then leaned against me. "I hope I grow up to be like you." Her words seared through me, not with pride, but with humility. Because I knew I wasn't a saint. I had wanted revenge, craved it, built it with my own hands. And for a time, it had consumed me. But in the end, I had chosen something else. Not because I was pure, but because I realized revenge leaves you empty, while love leaves you whole. Claire and I never fully returned to what we once were. Too much had been broken, too many words unsaid. But slowly, brick by fragile brick, we built something new. Not the warm home of the past, but a shelter of survival, honesty, and the unshakable bond of blood. And in quiet moments, when the children laughed or when Claire's tired head rested on my shoulder, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The irony was sharp as a blade. The daughter who had once called me an extra mouth was now fed by my hands, sheltered by my roof, and shielded by the same love she had tried to cast away. That was my revenge. Not the rent, not the ownership, not Tom's downfall, but survival, resilience, and proving that no matter how many times the world tried to throw me out, I would always find a way back in. So I ask you, listening now, if the people you love betrayed you, cast you aside when you were weakest, would you choose revenge? Or would you find the strength to protect them anyway? Tell me, what would you do? Because sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's survival.